Who is the Houndmaster? Where did she get that dog?
What the dog doing?
Why is she evil? Well, let me tell you the brutal and tragic story of Portia Maye,
Once again, it's just us.
the Houndmaster. Portia Maye's story begins on a tropical island in the Caribbean by the name of Fortune. This island was founded thanks to her father's help, and it was a very nice settlement of sailors and merchants with a vast trading network that brought many cultures and knowledge around the world. Her father, an adventurous sailor, would always tell her stories from the other side of the earth, like Arabian Nights, Shakespeare, and even Greek mythology, and he would teach her how to sail and navigate the seas by using the stars. He wanted his daughter to explore the world together with him. Based on this information, we can assume that Portia was born somewhere between the 18th century and the 19th century, as a vast trading network was already established by this point, and the fictional Fortune Island would be located somewhere near the Bermudas and the islands of Cuba, Haiti, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico, as we know thanks to an add-on that they were already investigating what would end up being the Bermuda Triangle phenomenon. One day, Portia would accompany her father on a trip to Italy for trading purposes. There, they would acquire a litter of Corso puppies that they would train as hunting dogs for Fortune's yearly hunting games, and as a special reward for her daughter, she would be able to keep the strongest out of the puppies for her upcoming 12th birthday. She named the puppies Caesar, King, Shah, Athena, but one of them stood out. She called that one Snug. But before she could begin training the dogs, a violent storm pushed their boat, the Knight's Dream, of course, into a dangerous area controlled by freebooters, violent pirates. Her father tried to steer the ship to safety, but it was too late. A dreaded group of pirates, led by Mad Moloch, attacked them and took complete control of the Knight's Dream. The crew that survived the attacks were pitted against each other as if they were fighting in a battle royale, promising the sole survivor that they would be let go. Portia's father refused to participate in such barbaric games, and, angered by his resistance, Moloch's son, Tariq, tortured him for hours, and eventually he slit his throat. Keeping Portia alive as a means to go back to Fortune, they left the Knight's Dream with the minimum crew to operate it. Their plan was simple: force Portia to lead them to Fortune, attack it, pillage, and burn it to the ground. But Portia would not let these barbarians take the last part of her father from her. Using the skills her father taught her, she would lead them, of course, through an area that was rumored to be cursed. This area was known as the Dragon's Tooth. Some believed the area had a dark energy on it, some otherworldly evil where monsters never seen before would roam freely and kill anyone who approached them. Portia didn't know if this was true, and if it was, she didn't know if she would survive. But if that's what it takes to end Moloch's terror, so be it. She had nothing to lose. As she approached the Dragon's Tooth, she noticed that something was indeed wrong with this area. Dark clouds appeared. A cold black fog would surround them all. Sudden rain fell, and a fierce wind rocked the ship down. Moloch knew that this area was cursed, so they turned their ship away in order to survive, and they let Portia and her crew to die. But Portia didn't want to surrender. She plowed through the dark fog and lightning. She was scared, but this was her only opportunity. Suddenly, the last thing she remembered before falling to the ocean was a massive tentacle crashing onto the ship. She woke up, confused, not knowing where she was, but with a familiar face staring her down. It was Snug. He licked her face and barked for her to get up. The sand in this beach was purple, something she had never seen before, not even in her father's tales. But it was not the time to be dazzled. She stood up, body still hurting, and faced the dog. Snug barked, as if he understood the assignment, and he started to sniff the ground, leading her to a cluster of coconuts and purple seaweed, food to eat. These would be the first meals that she would eat in this mysterious island, and meals that she would share with her trusty companion, as you can see on one of her add-ons. They were stranded in the Dragon's Tooth, a mysterious place, an in-between world, something her father told her stories about, a living nightmare that tortured the mind and played with her heart. She would hear weird sounds all around her, mysterious fog creatures, and she would also suddenly see hallucinations of Moloch all over her. She closed her eyes, scared, not knowing what to do. After all, she is only 11 years old. But Snug would help her by jumping into her lap, barking at her so she could get back her composure. Over the years, Portia would act like a true survivor, taking whatever parts washed ashore and defending herself with Snug against ferocious animals, vicious humans, and savage abominations. Creatures out of this world, but that tasted good, as also proven by another add-on of hers. Snug was now an absolute unit, weighing over 100 pounds, and he would follow Portia everywhere. They were an unbeatable pair, and no survivors on that island dared to even come close to them, and even if they did, they would not live to tell the tale. That's when suddenly, one day, she saw something impossible. She saw the Knight's Dream, her father's ship, drifting offshore in a cold black fog. Was this an hallucination? Was it real? She didn't doubt it. Immediately, she entered the water, but a group of castaways with the same plan fought her for it. In that moment, she showed how truly ruthless she was. She would not let a bunch of useless survivors ruin her opportunity to escape. In her mind, she slaughtered Moloch 50 times, and only kept those willing to cooperate with her so they could crew her ship. But before leaving with her ship and the crew, they spent days roaming the island in order to find someone. Snug. He disappeared the moment she entered the water. Her loyal companion, gone. But this was not right. He couldn't have died, as he would kill anyone that dared to even touch him. And he wouldn't betray Portia. He was gone, as if he only lived in her imagination. For the next decades, Portia would terrorize the Caribbean in her search for revenge against Moloch. She only attacked pirates, taking their gold and torturing them sadistically to satisfy something dark inside her, a parasite that demanded violence. Sometimes, when they couldn't find any new pirates to kill, the darkness would take control of Portia, and she would see every human around her as Moloch. She would attack and butcher everyone and anyone until her trusted guard dogs barked at her to stop. And it was at that moment when Moloch would suddenly disappear, and she would see the terrible scenes she created. The crew feared her, and any attempts at betraying her only resulted in more lives being lost. But she knew that she couldn't beat Moloch alone, so she needed crew members on the Knight's Dream. One day, after many years, finally, she reached Mad Moloch's island. This was it. This was the moment she would avenge her father. Unlucky for her, Moloch was out in the high seas. But unlucky for him, Portia would still create a plan. She, along with her crew, captured everyone part of the gang, as well as captured Tariq, the son of Moloch, the killer of her father. When Moloch returned, he found his island deserted. There was no one except a well-dressed lady offering chests of gold and jewels. She wanted to join Moloch's crew, and even prepared an amazing feast for him and the crew on his boat. He didn't know who this lady was. He couldn't know this was the small child that saw how his son killed her own father. He could not believe that child would have survived the Dragon's Tooth. So, he accepted the offer. Portia smiled. She assured him that Tariq would join them for dinner. Moloch was served an elaborate meal with plenty of drinks to satiate her thirst. Even with the many luxuries Moloch stole from others, he had never eaten this well and this delicious. The meat was juicy, pink, roasted crisp, and black on the outside. He wanted to know what kind of cattle this was. Wild boar? Venison? Portia smiled. His question would be answered, but not in the way Mollak hoped. She lifted up the final surprise, a golden food cover that hid the head of Tariq, his own son, his last expression being terror, his mouth vandalized with bullion and jewels. Mollak could not believe this. He didn't want to. While Mollak screamed in anguish, she took that opportunity to deliver the final blow. It was her moment. The moment she was waiting for all of her life. But before she could put an end to Mollak, he was taken by something into the darkness. She stopped laughing. Panic and rage completely engulfed her, the veins in her neck almost ready to burst. He was gone. He was not here anymore. He was stolen from her before she could stomp his head into a mess. But just as she was about to scream in rage, she heard something. Something that was impossible. Something she had not heard in many years. A familiar bark. And then she heard it again and again. It was Snug, and Snug had Mollak's scent. Just like in the Dragon's Tooth, it was not time to be dazzled. It was time to act. Along with Snug, she charged into the fog with her loyal friend. It was time to end this unfinished business. And this ends her story, at least what we know in the PTB. As you can see, the Houndmaster basically confirms the Wide Eyes theory, which explains that the entity can make the killer see the survivors as if they were something else, and this was used by the entity in order to make Portia the monster she is now. However, I do not think she sees all survivors as if they were Mollak. We know that Mollak is actually somewhere in the entity's realm, and we also know that the Houndmaster sees the survivors the way they are. She speaks to them and insults them in plural, so it's possible that instead, she thinks of these survivors as if they were part of Mollak's pirate gang. It is possible that for the Mori, sometimes she thinks that she is indeed killing Mollak, just like the hallucinations she had after escaping from the Dragon's Tooth. And let's talk about the Dragon's Tooth, because that is a perfect example of an overlap. For those unfamiliar with that term, overlaps were something that Hadi Kaur investigated for her podcast, and these are places in the real world that are connected with the entity. We know where an overlap is thanks to the black fog that seeps through it. The overlaps are basically cursed places, like Greenville Theater and how Sable willingly entered the fog. The creatures in Dragon's Tooth, as well as the tentacle that attacked her, were all part of the entity's realm, or fog creatures as we know it better. But what is interesting is that Portia was not taken when she entered the overlap. Instead, the entity manipulated her for years, growing violence inside her, and letting her think she will eventually get her revenge. It was only in the last second when the entity stole Mollak from her, and increased her rage. And that is what made Portia actually willingly take part in the entity's trials. In some of her voice lines, she doesn't understand where she is.
Where the devil are we?
But unlike Dracula, it's clear that she does not enjoy the entity's realm as him, but she is still there because she believes this is the only way to find Mollak. Another thing that her bio does not explain is the wound she has on the side of her face, as well as the glowing eye, which seems to be connected to Snug, which is also implied to be a creation from the entity. This would put the Houndmaster into a very similar situation as Charlotte with Victor. The real Snug might have been killed by Mollak and his gang, or stolen from Portia during the attack for their own. The Snug that appears in the backstory is only there anytime the entity's presence is strong, like in Dragon's Tooth or during Mollak's capture. Snug's eyes also glow an orange color, orange being the color of the entity. In fact, talking about the eyes, in-game, the moment you take control of Snug, if you miss or cancel, Portia will hold her eye as if she is hurting, and you can see that Snug's eyes are also glowing at all times, showing something unnatural. There is a clear connection between these two that is deeper than just a master and her dog, but it seems like this connection was made after she entered the fog. I hope that this video was enough to show you how cool this new pirate killer is. Let me know if you learned something new, and as always, thank you for watching and have a nice day.